being open to the evolution is what's important, because the truth is nobody has this stuff mastered right now, and pretending otherwise is a pretty big red flag in my opinion.
Hit it! That's what I'm talking about. Wait!
Okay, now, from the beginning.
Hit it, boys.
Welcome to Higher Ed Pulse, your no-fluff guide to artificial intelligence in higher ed. I'm Mallory Willsea, bringing nearly 20 years of edtech and marketing expertise straight to your earbuds. Higher ed leaders are expected to master AI overnight, but let's be real, no one has time to sift through every headline, hot take, or research report. That's why every Monday I'll break down what actually matters, fast, clear, and to the point. Want to sound like the smartest person in the room at your next team meeting? You're in the right place. Let's dive in. Welcome back to Higher Ed Pulse. On today's episode, what if AI isn't replacing you, it's reporting to you? Picture 20 unpaid interns, eager, messy, and waiting for direction. With me today is Fran Zablocki, head of strategy at Fastspot. Fran has spent his career helping higher ed institutions untangle web and content strategy, marrying traditional marketing practice with emergent communication methods to make digital experiences more intuitive for humans. At Fastspot, he's now leaning into AI not as a replacement for expertise, but as an extension of it. Fran, welcome to the Pulse.
So excited to be here, Mallory. Thank you.
Yay! I'm so happy you're here too. We used to work together at Stoner, and as I was just saying before we hit record, we were podcasting in the olden days under Higher Ed Live, and I feel like we need to reminisce about that because you've dusted your microphone off. You've come out of podcast retirement for the Pulse. I think the text changed a little bit since you last recorded one of these, right?
Yeah, I mean, the reunion tour has apparently started, but yes, all the technology has gotten a lot easier. We kind of just click a button, join a thing, and it goes. And I recall back in the day having multiple laptops and screens and overlapping audio and video systems going, and it was a little wild. And we still managed to make it work, but it's a lot easier today.
I always have a couple photos of you that come up in my time hop every year because we did some on-site recordings together at various events and on a campus once. And so I always have these like really cool photos of like the background of what it would take. And you are not lying when you said it took multiple computers. We had like a whole system set up in some cases just to even live stream. It was wild.
Yeah, it was very much a command center look at the time.
And here we are now about to talk about artificial intelligence. Like, who would have thought, Fran, 10 years ago?
Yeah, I know. It's wild. I'm excited, though.
So I think it goes without saying, Fran, that you and I have seen a lot of digital change over the course of our careers, from things like the rise of the CMS to responsive design, the explosion of social. Each time, some leaders rushed in while others waited it out, and AI is really the latest wave here. But the question is how to approach it with both curiosity and caution. At Fastspot, Fran is treating AI like a team of interns, a support layer that speeds research, surfaces insights, and helps prototype ideas faster. Using tools like Notion, Perplexity, and Claude, workflows are being reshaped, and the result isn't fewer humans, it's smarter humans that are better equipped to spend time where it matters most. But this doesn't seem like blind adoption from my conversations with Fran. His perspective is rooted in 2 decades of watching technology cycles come and go, seeing that the fundamentals, clarity, strategy, alignment with client goals, they all are the things that still matter the most. And the opportunity is to use AI to extend those fundamentals and not replace them. So in today's conversation, Fran and I are going to explore how they're experimenting inside Fastspot and some lessons that higher ed leaders can draw from these past transformations in order to help us kind of separate out real progress around AI from just the hype. So Fran, you've, as we've noted, been through all of these waves of tech change in higher ed in your career, and each of those changes promise to open things up, whether that was making the web more usable or more equitable. But in this moment, AI just feels a little more complicated. So from your vantage point, what do you think feels different about AI than those previous waves of tech change?
Sure. I think the breadth of AI, first of all, there's just so many different contexts and applications that we can think of AI in, and even just kind of narrowing AI into our use case for higher education or building websites and what that means for search is still narrowing it from all the other applications that are happening all over the place. So I think, first and foremost, it's so big you can't possibly get your hands around it all at once, right? So I think different from something like CSS or responsive design, or when we started to go to mobile first methodologies, which were very web focused. These are tools and techniques that were introduced to make building and consuming the web easier. AI touches so much more than that, right? So it's kind of like just important to define exactly what we're even talking about, because if you just use AI broadly, it can just feel a little bit too big. So I think from the standpoint of the web, though, that AI is going to have a fundamental transformation. It's already doing so. It's already doing so with search. It's already redefining, how we think about what content goes on websites. It's redefining how we think of marketing funnels and decision-making processes online. And so, like any tool, like any technology, it can be both good and bad. It's how we use it, right? It's not necessarily altruistic in its own right. I don't think it actually was created with, the hopes and dreams of 18-year-olds looking for a college education in mind, but it's touching everything. And I think we've seen some really exciting improvements to certain aspects of it. I also think we've seen some stumbling blocks. So that's where some of my hesitation comes in.
Yeah, and I'll just take the opportunity to plug some of these episodes, but you mentioned the SEO piece, and I have many episodes from the last few months. Listeners, if you haven't caught them, go dig in, because there's great research that's out there. Just 2 weeks ago, had an awesome episode with the CEO of Manifera, and so I'd highly recommend checking that out. But Fran, going back to something you just said, let's dig into how you use AI in this web context at Fastspot. So a lot of us are still kind of reflexively starting with Google. I think you have mentioned to me that you've defaulted to Perplexity. And I find that really interesting because it signals to me a shift in how a web strategist is relating to information. It's not just about finding a link, but it's kind of shaping the research path as you go. I understand why, like the transparency of the sources from Perplexity, conversational threading, the ability to go deeper without starting over. Like these are all the reasons why I personally use Perplexity as well. And for me, it is like, it's a different relationship with the information than I am, ever used to with just a simple Google search. So that's me, but I want to hear, from your perspective, what makes Perplexity different for you, and how does it change the way that you're preparing for your client work?
Yeah, I mean, I landed on Perplexity for research after trying out ChatGPT and trying out just kind of Google's summary. And I mean, these things are shifting so quickly that I've even noticed some of the competitors using what Perplexity started with and starting to adopt more of the annotation and the citation mechanisms that Perplexity has. But I still think they're doing it the best. And that for me, as like a researcher and somebody who has to take a large topic and be able to distill it down into the pieces that are most salient to me to do my job and are going to be most relevant to my clients, it just is so efficient. I mean, I can go in, and it's also so flexible too, right? Like I can go in and I can start with a broad-based query or a broad-based, please give me an idea for the competitive landscape for this particular client or even this particular industry, right? We work with higher education, but we also work in several other verticals. And so I can present something like that, get a 20,000 foot view, and then see what it's citing, see what sources it's citing, either drill down into that while I'm right there in the results, or use that as a prompt to get a narrower set of results. And I just find the experience with Perplexity, the UI that they have, the way that it tracks, the progression of the conversation with AI and doesn't really, it just makes it easy to even go back and reference what I queried at the beginning and where I ended up at the end, which is actually really helpful. So it's just become a very useful tool for that. It's sped up that kind of process, and the citation and like how well it does with linking to the real content on websites is the piece that stands out to me, because with ChatGPT and some of the other tools, like I do feel like it's being obfuscated just a little bit, right? Like I'm sort of like, I get this information, but I'm not entirely sure where you're getting it from. So the citation piece really sold me.
ChatGPT's citations definitely have gotten better. I feel like for me, I kind of live, eat, breathe ChatGPT as my default. And so I have to actually remind myself to go to Perplexity. And every time I do, I'm like grateful because I'm like, oh, okay, this research process was so much better. But I will, I will give ChatGPT the flowers, like in that they have made their documentation of their sources a bit better. But you know what you said at kind of at the beginning of our conversation, that AI is so big that sometimes it's really hard to wrap your head around it. And I love your example with Perplexity, because every campus leader, marketer, communicator has to do research on something at some point. And Perplexity can be a really good gateway into testing out some of these tools. Are you introducing your clients to Perplexity, or are you really just using it in the background as a prep tool?
Mostly in the background, although we've had tons of conversations, as you can imagine, about AI in every context. And it's definitely something that I recommend to folks whose jobs on campus are to, get a whole bunch of information and really try to distill it down. And I mean, it is a huge time saver. It's really, really helpful. So yeah, it's a slightly different use case working in an agency with it, but I think it has a lot of applications for higher ed too. And I think probably the biggest piece that people are curious about is, how can it speed up the work that I'm already doing? How can it give me an idea for who's out there, especially if you're in the admissions area, just understanding kind of that landscape analysis, that competitor analysis. It's just really, really valuable to be able to see kind of what it's gathering from all these different areas. Because it's not just websites, right? It's crawling all the different sources and all the different channels at once. It's just a good starting point. You're going to end up in all different places when all is said and done. However, probably the most efficient starting point, in my opinion.
All right. So we've talked about the need for research and where Perplexity can come in. Let's talk about another thing that exists on every single campus, and that is documentation sprawl. It is the silent killer of institutional knowledge. And a lot of us, right? I've worked at plenty of company where this is true too. We bury our best practices in documents and outdated files. And when people leave, the wheel gets reinvented, even though things have been hashed out. And so I'm curious to hear how your team is kind of combating these challenges and how you've shifted the way that you're managing documentation, search, and processes with an AI first mindset.
Yeah. I mean, you mentioned it earlier. We've been doing this for 2 decades, and that's a lot of time for a lot of things to, get deposited in file systems and structures and whatnot. And hopefully we've cleaned it up a couple times in that 20 years. But I think, from my standpoint at Fastspot, it's really just been, we were using Notion as our documentation platform. We were already doing that before Notion even introduced AI tools. But the fact that they introduced AI search within Notion, and that basically gave us a AI search engine on top of all of our documentation and everything that we had, just made it way easier to see the sprawl kind of all at once. Again, that 20,000 foot view, you put in a query and it's pulling from everywhere, places that you may have even forgotten were there. And so I think that piece alone has let us realize where we've got old stuff, where we got redundant information, where we have things that need to be updated. And also for somebody who is new to us or new to a particular project or even a type of work, just having something that can be searched across that and is that powerful and can kind of slice it and also be prompted and talked to refine that search is really, really useful. So Notion and Notion AI has been a real time saver and has helped us get ourselves nice and organized and get things current.
Awesome. All right, let's talk about one last tool that you've mentioned that you're using, which is Claude. Prototyping, and I remember this back from the Stoner days, it is such a friction point between the strategy and the design phase of a project. And, that makes sense. It's really hard to show something that you're imagining before it even exists. I remember, feeling like sometimes great ideas would lose momentum at this stage of the project. And I know that you've used tools like Octopus in the past, but you have recently shifted to Claude. So talk to me about that shift and maybe even share an example of how Claude has had a positive impact on speeding up collaboration or that, stage of the project with your colleagues.
Sure. Yeah. I mean, as a strategist, I'm not somebody who is a designer or a developer, right? So the language, I use words as language, whether written or spoken, and translating an idea from those words into something that is more visual, like you said, can take more time. And so I have tools in my toolkit before AI came along that allowed me to do like structural diagramming and workflow stuff and, back of napkin sketches that didn't need to be high fidelity. What Claude provides and what AI coding provides is a way for me to have a vision of what I want in an interaction design, like an actual finished product, and be able to prototype that roughly, right? It's still just draft form. We're not going to like send it out to anybody, but in a way that just shortcuts all the explaining of everything. Oh, well, I want to have 4 tabs, but I want to have these content sections within those tabs, and I'd like there to be some kind of interaction or animation. Instead of me saying that as the first step to my human colleagues who are doing that in design and development, I'm prompting Claude and getting a response from it, refining it again to say, no, tweak this, do this. Actually, I meant this. And then once I'm satisfied with what Claude has given me, then I have something that just fast tracks the conversation and the understanding with everybody else on my team. So it just is a really nice way to do something I couldn't really do before, right? Like I could not have produced this type of thing myself in the past. Now I can. It helps everybody.
Here's a quick word from our sponsor. Southeast Missouri State University needed to launch more targeted campaigns faster, yet they were bogged down by manual campaign builds, slow approvals, and vendor overload. With Element 451, they eliminated 5 vendor tools and gained marketing superpowers in one platform. They saw a 13% increase in applications, processed applications within 2 days, and achieved 33 to 35% email open rates. The impact: personalized, automated campaigns running at scale without the drag. Ready to turn your next campaign around in hours, not weeks? Try an agent today at element451.com/agents. Something tells me the designers probably really appreciate getting these types of prototypes. Things are probably a bit clearer for them.
Yeah, it's the language and the format that they're used to working in, and I think it just makes that translation point much, much more efficient.
That's fantastic. And I think anyone listening to this can extrapolate this example within their own marketing team, because chances are you've got your content strategists and your designers working side by side. And it doesn't need to be a full prototype for a brand new landing page, but even in just those smaller projects where you are attempting to translate the ideas, which are word-based, into some beautiful design that's going to be really useful and, focused on the user. I think this is great. So we've talked Perplexity, we've talked Notion, we've talked Claude. Now let's talk about AI as this team of interns. I love that framing. It's one that I've also used over the last couple years because I think it captures this like mix of potential and messiness. Like if you've ever had an intern work for you, right? They add capacity, but they also need direction and supervision and context. And sometimes they can create more work than they save if they're not managed well. And I am sure many of us listening to this conversation are, nodding right now and being like, yeah, we've got those experiences too. So how is your approach to this team of interns? Where are you setting those boundaries and directions so that AI does extend expertise versus create more work?
Yeah, I would say I'm still in trial mode, the same way you'd be with a new intern, right? Let's challenge them, like throw a whole bunch of stuff at them, get to know each other, see how they work, but also, let's throw them some complex challenges and see how they perform and see how they react, right? And so I think, that's where I'm at right now in most cases, but that's also how I got to some of the solutions we just talked about, right? Like I was like, oh, okay, this actually works really well in this particular case. This intern is really good at data visualization, or this intern's really good at doing some, baseline research and synthesizing of information. So the challenge becomes, how many interns do I want to hire and how much am I going to supervise them? Knowing that like AI, at least at this point, isn't really beyond like the really eager, really good intern stage, right? Like I've had AI write marketing copy, but would never put that in front of a client, would need to do the final pass on that. AI starts the research, I finish it. AI, does put together a prototype, but that's for internal use only. I'm not sharing that with with a client. It's just for our internal stuff. So I think much like an intern, it's kind of like that entry point to doing the work, and someone needs to be supervising and reviewing them. You have to take into account your own time with this, right? Like I started thinking of it like, could I have done this faster myself? And this is not a challenge unique to AI, right? This is just, managing people too is like this. It's like, well, I can either try to like help you to learn how or get to the solution that's needed, or I can just do it myself. But the reality is you can't do everything, and you have to be able to decide what scenarios you're going to need help with and who's going to be able to help you the most. So with AI, I like to think of it right now that I've hired an entire team of interns, and I'm seeing which ones can sink or swim in different scenarios. And I'm probably only going to keep the ones where it's actually saving me time and not causing me to spend more time, or that I could have just done it myself. So I'm still in that experimenting phase, but it's starting to become a little bit clearer.
How are you talking to your clients about all of this?
Yeah, it's a good
by
question.
all of this, I mean AI, but treating it like interns, using these tools and just kind of diving in and testing it out. And I'm really curious if you're being met with curiosity or caution.
I think a little bit of both, and I think transparency is really, really important in all respects here. I think it's important to, state like what your policy on using AI is. I think, I don't think there's any point in anybody pretending like they're not trying all these things out. We're all doing this, we're all doing research. We're all trying these things out, trying to see what they can do. But from an agency standpoint, where clients, are looking for my expertise and my help with things, like that is what needs to be delivered, my expertise and my help ultimately, and so this, I really am using AI as an input to that, and people are aware of that, and clients are using AI as an input to that, and even, sending prototypes to us and things like that. But we just have to be, honest that we're all in a trial mode and be really clear about what it is that we're actually using AI for. I mean, we have to be very careful with client information and privacy and all of that, and so any AI things that we're using need to be locked down under lock and key, and so we're not out there like just using public chat GPT as a tool, and we've developed a policy internally to make sure that we're in compliance and whatnot. So it's something that is really important for everybody to consider. I mean, just like you would in higher ed or any institution, you need to have a thoughtful policy about how you're going to use AI, and it's going to evolve over time. But it's same idea for us.
Yeah. And that evolution and being open to the evolution is what's important, because the truth is nobody has this stuff mastered right now, and pretending otherwise is a pretty big red flag, in my opinion. We know, you were just talking about trust a little bit, and we know that, some AI applications could risk eroding trust if they're not handled carefully. And we know that students are really sensitive, right? From a user perspective, like, students just want clarity and they want trust. They want transparency. So with your, web strategist hat on, where do you see AI having the biggest gains around the web experience directly to improve, the student's experience with the website, getting the information they need when they need it? And then on the flip side, like, where are you still a little skeptical?
Yeah, I think early stage, similar to my research, early stage, it's just saving people time. I mean, if you're in the past, if you did a Google search to see, which schools had the program that you wanted, you'd get a list, and it would all be relative to, the algorithm that Google had. But if you were really doing an in-depth look at a program, you might look at 5 or 6 or 10 of the first results, right? And maybe half, maybe less than that would actually turn out to have a valid piece of information at the end of it. So I think what AI is really helping with is the initial search, and the fact that students used to spend a lot of time going to Google search results or having their friend tell them, here's a website link, and it may or may not pan out. And what I think is being helped by the AI summaries and by the AI search engines is that they're doing the synthesis, and they're kind of filtering things for you so that your very first view already has nothing but useful information in it. I say that also knowing that there's a flip side to it, and that the AI itself is making some decisions on what is most important to you, right? Which has always been the case, even with Google, like deciding like, here's what your results are going to be. And I do, worry a little bit that like if people are just using AI and getting their information and never really like checking and going to the website, that they may actually end up getting misinformed, right? We know that AI doesn't always get it right. But I do think that early stage exploration, like when you think about the decision-making funnel for whether I want to go and get a college degree and where I want to go and things like that, like just getting that kind of reference information, it's very, very good at that and doing it very efficiently. That gives people more time to be able to see more of things and even spend more time drilling down. My hope is that you get, the short list, you drill down in the results, you end up on the website. The website hopefully is also using some kind of enhanced search locally to help that. So you're kind of getting that at two different layers. And then eventually, I mean, I think that, the lower parts of the funnel and the journey are still similar to us, right? We're still trying to convince people that know that we have the program, that the fit is the best. And, we're trying to convince them ultimately to talk to a real human or come on campus and see real humans in person, right? So it's adding a layer there, but it's not necessarily fundamentally changing things outside of that zero-click initial piece where you may just never see them.
The Man Affair research that I referenced at the beginning of the episode actually identified a trust ladder within the research. And it gets to some of the things you were just talking about, because at the end of the day, coming to campus and talking to a human, the level of trust in that is, like exponentially higher than the level of trust in the like AI overview that Google is giving you when you just Google these things. So I think it's also important to remember, as you noted, AI is making some of the decisions about what's important to you, and the sources that are feeding those decisions are Reddit, YouTube, and Wikipedia, among others. But those are the top 3 sources that are feeding those AI answers. And so call to action for institutions, 2 things. Go test your AI visibility. You can literally do it every single day, document it, see how things change, because they will, and start paying attention to Reddit, YouTube, and Wikipedia if you haven't been over the last few years, because having a presence there is actually going to shape whether or not you show up in AI overviews.
Definitely. And I will say one more thing, that I do hope that AI weights official websites more highly moving forward. My one big concern with it is the fact that sometimes the official site with the official information is being superseded or being presented as a peer of information on some of these other channels. Not to say those other channels don't have really good takes, but I think it's just, like you said, worth going in and going under the hood and seeing what kind of results you're getting for things. It may surprise you to see some information that is not coming from you about you, and it's worth looking into.
Well, luckily, the research does show that humans are still weighting the official website higher on the trust ladder than those AI returns. But I am right there with you. Hopefully we'll see some of those algorithms start to shift over time. All right, Fran, as we're wrapping this one up today, let's come full circle. What lessons from those past transformations that you have experienced over the last 2 decades should higher ed leaders remember today as they are facing AI?
Well, it's scary and exciting all at once. And I think that it's important to take a step back, take a deep breath, and just remember that AI is a tool. It's a really powerful tool. It has, a million different applications, but we need to have goals for success for our institutions come first, and then figure out where the tool can help us, right? And the thing about AI is it's inviting experimentation. It's changing so much that even if you know what you're doing today, in a month or 2, it's worth revisiting again and trying it out again and seeing what the newest version can do and what, how it's learning and growing. So, it's impossible to get your head around it all at once. Start small, pick one piece at a time. I mean, that's what I did with this. I was like, I'm going to try Perplexity. I'm going to try out Claude. I'm going to see what it does well. I'm going to see what it doesn't do well. Do that first. And then once you feel comfortable with kind of the landscape and here's all the different flavors and what they can do, then think about, okay, what are we trying to do at our institution? What are our goals? Which of these particular tools in these settings is a good fit for that, or might actually help us to become more efficient, extend our capabilities, or give us insights that we might not have otherwise gotten. So I think, just take, fear of missing out is big. There's a lot of hype. Everyone's very excited about it, and it's moving really quick. So, just take a deep breath, dive in a little bit, experiment, and we'll all learn together, and it'll all end up okay.
Incredible and level-headed advice. Thank you, Fran. Folks, if you've enjoyed this episode and you're listening on Spotify or Apple, do not forget to hit subscribe. And maybe if you're feeling extra generous today, leave a 5-star review. Thank you all so much, Fran. Thank you. It was so great to reconnect. I'm assuming listeners can find you on LinkedIn. Anywhere else?
I'm on LinkedIn. You can see a lot of our work on fastspot.com. And yeah, that's the list.
Fabulous. All right, folks. Until next time. Bye-bye. Thanks for listening to the Higher Ed Pulse. The show is a proud member of the Enrollify Network, home to Higher Ed's largest collection of podcasts. Enrollify is where higher ed goes to grow. So be sure to check out our other podcasts, webinars, video clips, blogs, and more. Visit Enrollify.org and subscribe for all the latest details and content drops directly to your inbox. Enrollify is brought to you by Element 451, the digital workforce platform for higher ed. Learn more at element451.com.